Have you ever found yourself explaining, justifying, and defending yourself to someone who was never actually looking for the truth? You know the feeling. Someone accuses you of something. Maybe it is a lie. Maybe it is a distortion of what actually happened. Maybe it is a deliberate provocation from someone who wants to see you unravel. And so you respond. You explain yourself. You lay out the facts. You try to make them understand. And the more you talk, the worse it gets. The more you justify, the more guilty you appear. The more you plead your case, the more control you hand over to the very person who attacked you. And when it is finally over, when the conversation ends or the thread runs dry, you feel something strange. Not relief. Not vindication. Something closer to hollowness. Like you lost something you cannot quite name, even if no one could technically prove you wrong. That feeling is not irrational. It is information. It is your instinct telling you that something about the way you responded made things worse, not better. That the act of defending yourself, as natural and as human as it feels, actually cost you more than staying silent ever would have. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this dynamic with a precision that still feels startling centuries later. He watched rulers fall. He watched powerful men crumble under the weight of accusations they tried desperately to refute. And he observed something that very few people are ever willing to say out loud, that in the game of power and perception, the man who defends himself too eagerly is already losing. Not because he is wrong, but because the act of defending itself signals something to every observer in the room. In this video, we are going to dismantle everything you were taught about defending your reputation. We are going to go deep into why self-defense often backfires psychologically, why your enemies want you to explain yourself, and what Machiavelli says you should do instead. By the end of this, you will have a completely different relationship with criticism, accusation, and the almost irresistible urge to prove yourself to people who may not deserve that kind of power over you. What you are about to hear is not comfortable, but it will change how you move through the world. If this kind of content speaks to something you have lived through, the exhaustion of always defending yourself, the frustration of trying to prove your worth to people who seem determined not to see it, then like this video and subscribe. This channel exists for people who want to understand power, human nature, and how to protect themselves from the invisible forces that drain them. You are in the right place. Here is something almost no one tells you. The instinct to defend yourself is one of the most deeply wired responses in human psychology. When we feel falsely accused, unfairly judged, or publicly misrepresented, the drive to set the record straight is nearly overwhelming. It feels like a moral obligation. Like staying silent in the face of a lie makes you complicit in it. Like if you do not speak up, the wrong version of you will become the official one. And that fear is real. That fear is understandable. But it is also, in many situations, the exact thing your critics are counting on. Because here is what most people never consider. Not every accusation is an honest inquiry. Not every critic is someone who genuinely wants to understand what happened. Some people attack not to find the truth but to find the reaction. They want to see you scramble. They want to watch you justify and explain and twist yourself into knots trying to make them believe you. Because in that scrambling, in that desperation to be understood, you reveal something they can use. Your insecurities. Your emotional triggers. Your need for approval. And here is where it becomes psychologically devastating. The more you defend yourself, the more the conversation stays centered on the accusation. Every response you give, no matter how reasonable, keeps the spotlight on the original attack. You are essentially arguing on territory your enemy chose. You are playing on a field they designed. And the rules of that field almost always favor them. Machiavelli saw this in the courts of power he navigated. He saw intelligent, principled men destroyed not by the strength of the accusations against them, but by their own emotional response to those accusations. Their defensiveness read as guilt. Their urgency to explain read as desperation. Their need to be believed read as weakness. And once those impressions settled into the minds of the people watching, no amount of logical argument could shake them loose. This is the trap. And understanding it clearly is the first step to getting out of it. Part 1: The Psychology of Self-Defense. Let us start with the psychological mechanics of what actually happens when you defend yourself. Because what you think is happening and what is actually happening are two very different things. When you feel attacked, your nervous system reads it as a threat. Not just to your reputation, but to your sense of self. Who you are, what you value, the image you have built, all of it feels like it is under assault. And your brain, which is not particularly good at separating a social attack from a physical one, responds accordingly. Cortisol rises. The thinking part of your mind gets quieter. The reactive part gets louder. And you speak from that reactive place, which means you are not responding strategically. You are responding emotionally, even when your words sound logical. And other people can feel that. They may not be able to articulate it, but they sense the desperation underneath the explanation. They sense the need. And in the complex, largely unconscious way that human beings assess each other, that need registers as weakness. Not because you are weak, but because in that moment, your emotional state has made you dependent on their verdict. And dependence is the opposite of the kind of self-possession that commands genuine respect. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote about the importance of controlling how you are perceived. He understood that people are not primarily rational. They judge by feel, by impression, by the overall energy a person projects. And the energy of someone desperate to be believed is fundamentally different from the energy of someone who is simply, quietly, undeniable. There is a second psychological mechanism at work here, and it is even more insidious. It is called the backfire effect. Research in psychology has shown that when people have already formed a negative impression of you, being presented with evidence that contradicts that impression does not necessarily change their mind. In some cases, it actually deepens their conviction. Because the mind does not operate like a courtroom. It operates like a story. And when someone has already decided what the story is about you, new information that challenges that story feels threatening to them. So they resist it. They dismiss it. And your careful, reasonable defense gets filed away as more proof that something is off. This means you can be completely right, completely honest, completely justified in your explanation, and still make things worse by explaining. Because the problem was never informational. The problem was perceptual. And perceptions are not changed by arguments. They are changed by presence, by behavior, by time, and by the accumulated weight of what you consistently do when no one is watching. Most people miss this part completely. They are so focused on winning the argument that they never notice they are losing the war. But this is only the first layer. Because there is something even more important to understand about why your critics want you to defend yourself in the first place. Part 2: What your critics actually want. Let us be very direct about something. Some of the people who attack you are not motivated by justice. They are not confused about the facts. They are not honestly trying to understand what happened. They have made a calculated, or in some cases purely instinctive, decision to use accusation as a tool. And the tool only works if you pick it up. When someone who wants to destabilize you launches an attack, they are not aiming for your argument. They are aiming for your composure. They want to see the version of you that loses control. The version of you that becomes small and desperate and reactive. Because that version of you is far easier to dismiss, to manipulate, and to define in the minds of everyone watching. Think about what happens to your authority when you are visibly rattled. When your voice tightens. When your explanations become too detailed, too urgent, too eager to cover every possible angle of the accusation. People who were neutral, who had no strong opinion about the situation, start to wonder. Not because your words gave them reason to, but because your energy did. Because confidence does not look like that. And on some subconscious level, everyone in the room knows it. Machiavelli wrote explicitly about the danger of letting your enemies choose the battleground. He understood that when you respond to an attack on your opponent's terms, emotionally, urgently, from a place of needing to be believed, you have essentially accepted the premise that the attack was legitimate enough to deserve your full emotional investment. And that acceptance shifts the balance of power immediately. It puts you on defense. And the person on defense rarely wins the war of perception, even when they win the argument. There is a particular kind of person who is especially skilled at engineering this trap. If you have spent time around a narcissist, a manipulator, or someone who uses social dynamics as a weapon, you know exactly what this looks like. They say something cutting. They make a public accusation. They spread a subtle lie just credible enough to take root. And then they sit back. And they watch. Because what you do next tells them everything they need to know about how much power they have over you. If you react, if you chase the explanation, demand the correction, send the long message, make the public post, they have their answer. And they will use it again and again, because they have learned that this particular lever makes you move. But here is where it starts to get liberating. Because understanding this mechanism, truly seeing it clearly for what it is the beginning of freedom from it. Once you understand that the defense itself is often the trap, you stop being afraid of silence. You stop reading restraint as surrender. You start to see that there is a completely different category of response available to you. One that does not involve explaining yourself at all. And what that response looks like is something Machiavelli pointed to again and again. Not with anger. Not with retreat. But with a quality that is far rarer and far more powerful than either. We are now at the center of what this video is really about. Because what we have covered so far is not just philosophy. It is a pattern that plays out in real life every single day, in workplaces, in relationships, in families, in public spaces online and off. The trap of a defense. The gift of composure. The strategy behind restraint. And before we go deeper into exactly what Machiavelli says to do instead, I want to ask you something directly. Has there ever been a time in your life when you defended yourself over and over again to someone who never actually intended to believe you? A relationship, a workplace situation, a social environment where no matter how well you explained yourself, it was never enough? Drop your experience in the comments. Because I promise you, you are not alone in this. And naming it is the first step to never falling into it again. Part 3. What to do instead. So if defending yourself too eagerly is the trap, what is the alternative? What exactly does Machiavelli, and the broader strategic tradition he represents, say you should do when you are attacked, falsely accused, or publicly undermined? The first and most powerful move is composure. Not silence as avoidance, not silence as suppression, but the deliberate, grounded, almost unsettling stillness of a person who is not shaken by what just happened. This is different from pretending nothing was said. It is the visible embodiment of someone who knows who they are clearly enough that this particular attack does not move them. And that quality, that rootedness, is more persuasive to observers than any argument you could ever construct. Think about the people in your own life whom you respect most deeply. When they are accused of something unfair, what do? In most cases, they do not scramble. They do not over-explain. They acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged, and they move. They do not give the accusation more weight than it deserves by drowning it in response. And that restraint, that measured non-reaction, communicates something profound. It says, I know what I am. What you say about me does not change that. The second move is to let your actions answer. This is perhaps the most Machiavellian principle of all. Machiavelli was deeply skeptical of words as a currency of reputation. He understood that people ultimately judge by outcomes, by what they can see and verify over time, by the cumulative evidence of your behavior, your results, your consistency. If someone claims you are untrustworthy, the answer is not an argument. The answer is demonstrated trustworthiness over a sustained period of time, in visible and undeniable ways. If someone claims you are incompetent, the answer is not a rebuttal. The answer is work so clearly excellent that the claim becomes absurd to anyone paying attention. This takes longer than a clever response. It requires patience. But it is essentially undefeatable, because it does not depend on anyone's willingness to believe you. It depends only on the evidence of reality. The third move is strategic silence. And this is the one that feels the most unnatural, because it runs directly against the instinct to clear your name. But Machiavelli observed something crucial about silence in the context of accusations. It creates uncertainty in the accuser. When you do not react the way someone expected, when you do not give them the emotional escalation they were fishing for, they are left with nothing to push against. And attacks with nothing to push against lose their momentum. They dissipate. They often turn back on themselves, because people start asking why the accused seems so unbothered. And that question plants doubt in a way that no defense ever could. The fourth move is choosing your battles with surgical precision. This is not about never responding. There are times when silence would genuinely cost you, when a false narrative is gaining so much traction that inaction would allow it to calcify into accepted truth. Machiavelli was not naive about this. He understood that strategic restraint does not mean universal passivity. The skill is in reading the situation clearly enough to know which silence serves you and which silence destroys you. When a response is necessary, make it once. Make it calm. Make it brief and grounded in fact rather than emotion. And then stop. Do not revisit it. Do not elaborate because someone pushed back. Do not keep defending a position you already stated clearly. State it and let it stand. Because the man who says something once, clearly, and then moves on projects an entirely different kind of authority from the man who keeps saying it. And there is a fifth move that sits beneath all of these. It is the most difficult. It is the most important. And it is the one that most people never fully grasp. The deepest reason people feel compelled to defend themselves is not that they care about the truth. It is that they are not yet certain enough of their own worth to tolerate being misunderstood. Sit with that for a moment. Because it is one of the most uncomfortable truths in all of this. When your identity is secure, when you know yourself deeply, when your sense of who you are is not built on other people's recognition of it, then criticism, even unfair criticism, even vicious public attacks, do not shake the foundation. They may sting. They may frustrate. But they do not threaten anything real, because what you are is not actually what they say you are, and no amount of them saying it can make it true. But when your identity is externally dependent, when your self-image requires constant confirmation from the people around you, then every accusation feels like an existential threat. Every critic feels like they have the power to define you. And the desperate need to defend yourself is, at its core, a need to get that confirmation back. To make the person who questioned your worth tell you that you are okay after all. And here is the truly devastating irony of that dynamic. The more you need someone to believe in your worth, the less capable they are of actually providing it. Because the need itself communicates that you are not sure. And people cannot give you certainty about yourself. Only you can build that. Only the disciplined, consistent, evidence-filled experience of living in alignment with your values can build it. And once it is built, it is genuinely unshakable. Not because no one can hurt you, but because no one's words can erase what you have actually done and who you have actually become. Machiavelli's ultimate insight was never just about tactics. It was about the kind of inner architecture that makes tactics unnecessary. The man who has built genuine self-knowledge, genuine consistency, genuine discipline, that man does not need to defend himself because his life defends him. His presence defends him. His track record, his composure, his unshakable behavior under pressure, these are a defense that no attacker can dismantle, because they are not built from argument. They are built from reality. And this is where it gets darker in the most unexpected way. Because the people who most desperately need to attack you, who most relentlessly try to make you justify yourself, they often sense this quality in you before you do. They are drawn to it like a force. Because if they can make you doubt yourself, they have temporarily borrowed the certainty they themselves do not have. And your self-defense is their fuel. Stop fueling it. Here is where we land after everything we have walked through together. The next time someone attacks you, falsely, unfairly, strategically, or just carelessly, you now have a choice that most people do not even know exists. You do not have to enter the trap. You do not have to prove yourself to someone who may not want to be convinced. You do not have to chase a verdict from a jury that was never impartial. You can choose composure. You can choose to let your actions do what your words never could. You can choose strategic silence where silence serves you, and a single grounded response where it does not. You can choose to build, slowly and undeniably, the kind of inner certainty that makes the need for defense irrelevant. None of this is about becoming cold. None of it is about shutting down. It is about becoming so rooted in who you actually are that you stop giving temporary critics permanent access to your peace. It is about understanding, as Machiavelli understood, that perception is not managed through explanation. It is managed through presence, through consistency, through the quiet authority of a person who does not need the room to like them in order to feel okay. The man who never has to defend himself is not the man who was never attacked. He is the man who built himself so solidly that the attacks slide off. Not because he is untouchable, but because he is undeniable. That is who you are becoming. And now that you see the trap clearly, you will never fall into it the same way again. Thank you for watching this all the way through. If something in this video shifted something for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is tired of defending themselves to people who will never truly listen. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. And when you are ready, the next video is already waiting for you. Click it now, it continues exactly where this one left off.